So, while we have a moment, let's talk about Manchester. So, after Preston, I got on the train to Manchester, and it was slightly longer than I had expected, slightly more expensive, but I made it. It's weather not unlike this, pouring rain. I was not there to visit Manchester. Manchester is a big city. I was literally there to visit the Cathedral. So I got off at Manchester at Piccadilly. Now, if you don't know, Manchester has a town centre that's perhaps 2 miles squared, and it's within a triangle, the triangle of stations. In the north you've got Manchester Victoria, and then like a triangle you have the other 2 stations further south, and one of them is Oxford Road and one of them is Piccadilly. And between those 3 stations you have 3 little shuttle buses, and these shuttle buses, it turns out, are run by Manchester City Council, and they do routes around the centre of town, sort of between those 3 stations, if you like. They run every 10 minutes and they are completely free. I have to say that I was very, very impressed indeed. The number 3 is the shortest route, the number 1 is the second shortest route, the number 2 is the longest route. So I decided to take the longest route because first it meant I could have a nice sort of drive around the centre of Manchester, and secondly it did happen to pass the Cathedral. The Cathedral is pretty central. It is near Manchester Victoria. Now, here's another thing. So, Manchester Victoria isn't a station that you generally tend to visit. If you're going through Manchester, you probably go through both Oxford Road and Piccadilly, but you're unlikely to go through Manchester Victoria, which comes in from towards the Pennines, and it terminates there. It terminates at the MEN Arena, the Manchester Evening News Arena. People who have followed me for a long time will know that about 9 years ago I made my last formal visit to Manchester, and I came across the Pennines and into Manchester Victoria, and the reason for that was because I was going to visit the UFC. It was my first UFC visit, 85 I believe is the number, and it was being hosted at the Manchester Evening News Arena. So I knew that the Cathedral was roughly around that side because I remember seeing signposts for it. So anyway, this little shuttle bus came and picked me up and took me right past the MEN. You won't be able to see it on my YouTube Pulvaris channel or the MySpace channel, because this is back in 2007-ish, and it was before I had the ability to film in any real capacity. Do you know, I come down here so that I can talk alone. Dipstick there. I'm not going out into the rain, so I'll just have to put up with me mumbling to myself. Anyway, so finding the Cathedral was no problem, because after we passed Victoria on this little shuttle bus, it literally dropped you off at the door. The Cathedral is like a TARDIS. It looks from the outside very small. From the inside it is huge. It has no proper transepts. They claim it's built on a sort of old Norman church, but it's Gothic style, it's medieval, it's Middle Ages. Saved in terms of the dissolution of the monasteries, because I do believe at one point there was a little monastic community there, by Queen Elizabeth I, who reinstated it basically after the dissolution. So it has no transepts particularly. It does have some kind of chapel thing on the south which you can't get to. There is no crypt, there is no triforium. The choir is pretty central, in fact, and I have never in my entire life seen such a beautiful wooden choir screen as I have in that, and I actually very naughtily took some photos. The other thing that strikes you is the fact that it is made of a funny kind of coloured stone, which is blackish brown, so the inside looks the colour of wood, but it's stone. As I said, it's Gothic. The other thing I liked about it was its military chapel, which lay on the north side. It has some lovely stained glass windows, Some of them are quite modern, though. That particular one was put in after the Blitz. There was a Manchester Blitz, and although the cathedral wasn't terribly damaged, they sort of put that. It's like a fire. It's like a window, and it looks like fire. And they put it in the military chapel after the war. There is only one altar, and that is in the choir. However, because the very east end of the sequarium is quite open plan, you can see the sort of lady chapel, if you like, behind the high altar, if you're sitting in the choir looking to the east. But altogether, very nice. The one issue they have is that their visitor centre is not in the cathedral. It is across another, well, it's sort of opposite, and it's actually, the entrance is through a tea shop. Not terribly easy to realise that that is the entrance to the visitor centre as well. Anyway, so I went in there and I had a nice cup of tea, and I have to say they do leaf teas, etc., etc., and it was quite expensive. We were talking about £3 to £4 for a two-potter of tea, which is expensive, but let's be honest with ourselves and say we didn't pay, did we, for travel around Manchester itself, so fair enough. We might have to stop here, because this might spew out a lot of people. Anyway, I'll keep going for now. Anyway, so then I looked in the visitor centre, which is a little bookshop underneath, which is quite nice. And also in that bookshop, underneath the bookshop, so you're now looking at 2 levels below ground level, you have what looks like a sort of archaeological dig, or it's been an archaeological dig that's exposed a bridge, and that bridge used to be over the Ribble. Now the Ribble still runs through the city, in fact, but as we know, the Ribble is prone to change its course, and at one point it flowed right by the cathedral, and the bridge there is the local hanging bridge, where they used to, hang the witches or whatever to see if they would float, or whatever you do with witches, I don't know. So anyway, that was there. Then I got back on the little bus, and we did go for a good half an hour tour around the centre of the city. I didn't get off because it was pouring with rain. I had planned possibly on getting off to take a few pictures of some of the areas around. There was a beautiful library, there was a museum of something or other, but in the end I thought, no, I'm not going to bother. So I got dropped off back at the station that I arrived in, which was Piccadilly, and I very easily got a train there, and it was my usual train that I used to take to Liverpool, the Trans-Pennine Express. Lovely, beautiful scenic country, and not actually that long a journey, about an hour's journey from Manchester to Leeds. You have some beautiful scenic sights. Unfortunately, I was having to sit in a place because there were lots of reservations, and I couldn't get near the window to show you any of the beautiful sort of Pennine expanses, and the little, Staley Bridge and that sort of thing. Nice little sort of towns perched on the side of hills and stuff like that. So never mind. And then once in Leeds, it was quite easy to get a train back here. And that is the end of my tour. So now I just need to get a bus and go home. The end.